Hello, welcome to the Nexus Podcast. Here, we're all about connecting anyone and everyone with our environment. We'll aim to do this through sharing knowledge and discussing various topics that show people how they can be better connected to nature and the world we live in. At the end of each episode, we'll also provide some actionable steps that anybody can take to help make our world a better place. I believe that the impact of everyday people can be profound if we all act and strive to leave the world in a better way than we found it, especially our environment. I'd love anyone and everyone to be able to listen and enjoy tuning in. I hope we can be the nexus between you and the beautiful world we live in and so rely on. This is Jessica York bringing you another episode of Nature's Nexus. Hello everybody and welcome back to the Nature's Nexus podcast. Today I have a guest who is Sarah Mika. Hello and welcome, Sarah.
Hi Jess, thank you very much for having me.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for coming on the podcast. So today, I like to start off with our two quick questions that we do at the start of each episode. And the first one is, what is it that you love most about our natural world?
I mean, the easy answer is that I love rivers and estuaries, and just being out in it. It's calming. I find it very calming.
Yeah, beautiful. And how do you get connected to nature, or when do you feel the most connected?
Definitely when I'm out in there, and every time I do it, I think I've got to do more of this, and then life gets busy, so it's a while before I get back at it. But yeah, just hiking, being out there, and just kind of taking the time to stop and absorb it.
Yeah, and I think that's so important. A lot of times that some people might miss out on is just stopping and enjoying it when you're out there. Yeah. Oh, lovely. Oh, well, for those who don't know Sarah, today I'm joined by Dr. Sarah Mika, and she, who alongside her academic work has been a volunteer with the New South Wales Rural Fire Service, also known as the RFS, for 16 years. And through her work with the RFS, Sarah has first-hand experience of what it is to be a firefighter and how fire moves through landscapes, how communities respond, and what it means to care for land in real time. Sarah brings both lived experience and deep ecological understanding to our conversation. So that's what we're going to be talking about in today's episode, is Sarah's experience with being a volunteer firefighting. So first off, talking about the RFS, Sarah, it's a very worthy cause to dedicate your time towards. What inspires you to volunteer with the Rural Fire Service?
At the time I was studying, and I had moved to Armidale from Brisbane. So I was away from family, and I wanted to put roots down in the community. And then it also was really obvious to me, moving from the city, where you kind of think if something goes wrong, then these kind of nameless, faceless people, someone will fix it. And when I came to Armidale, I realised that in a much smaller community, that someone had to be us. It was, we were the people who were fixing things, and so I had the opportunity to put up my hand and volunteer, and didn't know what I was getting myself into at all. But it has been an amazing journey. I've met some really good friends and had a lot of opportunities, and yeah, I just look back and I'm so grateful.
Yeah, that makes total sense. It would be a great way to meet people and a great way to give back to the community as well and help out. And like you said, you sort of always think, somebody will do it. Somebody will be out there volunteering, doing these things. But then, there's the other people who actually put their hand up and go and do it. So that's great. And what's it like to work in that environment? I imagine it could be very intense.
Look, it can be intense at times. I had never seen a bushfire before I volunteered, so my first one was terrifying to actually see a bushfire close and personal. But there's a lot of training, there's a lot of support, and so even though I will probably never forget that first fire, at no time was I in danger. So it's fantastic to have the skills and capability to do something in an emergency. So I really value that I don't feel helpless. I had friends in the 2019 fire season, and they were seeing what I was seeing, but they didn't know how to help, and so that kind of wore on them. Whereas I had something I could do and be a part of, and so I think it's it's being a part of something bigger, and that does good for the community, good for the environment, and then obviously it's the camaraderie that you build with people that you train with and go off and fight fires with.
Yeah, for sure. Can imagine people would develop some lovely friendships and everything when you're out there, especially in that sort of work environment together.
Mm. Yep. And people, that like obviously people not necessarily with the same interests as me, but we come together for that. So it's a good breadth of community that you kind of get plugged into.
Yeah, you sort of got that common cause that you're all working for.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yep.
lovely. Can you share a story from your firefighting experience that really impacted you or taught you something unexpected about nature and that environment that you're in?
Um, I can probably I can probably give you two stories. One for nature, and then one that probably really impacted me. So I just remember in one of my very early fires, we're driving into a community that was affected by a large fire, and there were just so many fire trucks from all over and such, a huge number of people, and really walking in and kind of just being a part of that was amazing. And obviously the community was really grateful. And so it just, there's this really strong feeling of contributing helpfully and being really valued. And so it was an amazing feeling to walk in because I didn't know much of it at the time and I wasn't sure, how it would go, and people were just really happy to see me, and so it just felt, it was a good sense of community in a difficult situation for those people. And then I think with nature, obviously, we're going out and we're seeing, we're seeing fire in the landscape, and I remember during, the 2019 fire season, that was after, seeing the New England in drought, and it was certainly the most intense drought that I've ever seen in the New England. I've been here over 20 years. Um, and so that was really oppressive. And then, that fire season was very oppressive. And I just remember, we were fighting fires around rivers down in the Macleay and the Man River and the Clarence catchment and areas of river that I loved. These are some of my favorite spots in the world, and seeing them heavily drought affected. The water holes dried up or sort of with algae and then the fires. And I just remember thinking like I'll never see this landscape that I love and look the same in my lifetime. And then obviously it rains again, and it was amazing, really, like how quickly parts of the country bounce back, not all of it. There's still areas where the canopy and the forest, aren't there. But just seeing the undergrowth bounce back and the rivers, flowing again. And so it just reminded me of the resilience which I remember this kind of really contrast. It rained on Christmas Day and then I remember in February we were driving around in the paddocks that had been absolutely bare. You could barely see the cows because the grass was so high, and it was just such a fast turnaround. And yeah, just really reminding me of resilience and the power of our natural landscape to come back if we make sure that it's still got enough sort of seed bank and capability to come back. It's really good to see that.
Yeah, and I can definitely resonate with that story. I mean, in Australia, it's quite common, obviously, to see, everything bounce back after a bushfire, but also watching everything bounce back after that severe drought we had. You wonder if it will ever recover, and then all of a sudden it does. So, it can be amazing to see that. It just does remind you how resilient nature is.
Mm. And for me, just sort of being involved in like obviously doing my work in environmental science, and then through the fire season, how tightly like our mental health is like tied up with the health of the country. So it really is that kind of healthy country, healthy water, healthy mind, healthy people, and just kind of seeing in a rural community the oppression in the community sort of as that drought sort of lingered and intensified, and then as the fire season went through, and then really it was that as the kind of country started coming back once it started raining, that you could see people coming back and kind of recovering from that. And it's just it's so easy, with the pressures of work and being busy, that we forget how tightly aligned and tied into nature that we truly are, like in terms of water security and food security, and yeah, just really, you can you read the theory of that, but seeing it firsthand was a really strong experience for me.
Yeah, and that makes sense, I think, because people sort of, they want to be in a nice environment and have a nice world around them, and yeah, that all makes sense. Yeah.
Yep.
So when you're out firefighting, how do you balance that, protecting different aspects of the environment? So you've obviously got human life to worry about in really bad circumstances, all that property, but then you've also got the natural environment. And how do you balance all that when you're responding to a fire?
It's a really good question, and it's obviously something that on bad fire days we do. It's not a struggle, but it is something to be highly aware of, and so there are priorities. So obviously the overriding priority is firefighter safety. So we need to make sure that we stay safe and healthy, so that we can come back and keep firefighting another day. So that's the overriding priority. Then obviously protecting life is our first priority, and so that includes human life, but it also includes stock and domestic animals and the environment. And so obviously, if you have a choice between human life and the environment, we're going to pick human life. But we also do, it is very much about minimizing damage to the environment. So, there's some really good stories out there of where fire agencies and probably led by national parks have really protected species of intergenerational significance during significant fires, and the amount of hard work and resourcing that have gone into to really make sure that those species are maintained. And so and after that, then kind of looking at property, and then after that is about restoring normality. So it's helping the community sort of come back to their and recover back into kind of their normal lives, if you like. And so that kind of list of priorities and order of priorities is in everything that we do. So definitely life comes first, but yeah, the environment's up there because it is life as well, and it is a natural asset and a natural good that we want to protect.
Yeah, of course. How does that work you do with the fire service impact or connect with the local ecosystems then in that environment that you're trying to protect?
I think it's in a couple of ways. So firstly, obviously there's a lot of effort put into hazard reduction, and so these are sort of much cooler controlled fires, typically sort of run through the cooler parts of the year when we're not facing fire activity already. And so that lets us go and reduce the fuel load of the surface fuels, the fuels, the leaf litter, if you like, that is just sort of lying on the ground. And it lets us go in with very cool fire that is controlled. We don't want it to get up into the treetops. But we just want to kind of reduce the surface fuels. So if a bushfire comes through later, or when a bushfire comes through later, the intensity of that bushfire is less, and it sort of A, makes it more controllable, but B, does less environmental damage, because we know a lot of the Australian native plants, like, they are fire adapted, not all of them, but a lot of them are. And so, some of them do need fire to regenerate, reseed, or for seeds to germinate. And so again, those kind of cooler burns allow that sort of natural regeneration to happen. But during hotter fires, then it can damage the seed bank, and it can certainly kill, the adult vegetation. So the hazard reduction is a big one. Also, you're doing it in small patches, and you kind of thinking about, how you started, and so it has far less of an impact on the wildlife as you sort of reduce that fuel load. So that's sort of one way. Another way is to really think about, the different plant types when we are firefighting. So obviously we don't want to be putting it into streamside vegetation. So being aware of that, or of any sort of ecologically sensitive vegetation, wetlands, for example. We don't want fire in peat swamps or wetland vegetation. So just really sort of trying to work with the landscape, keep it out of where it shouldn't be, and where it's going to kill those plant community types, and reduce the intensity elsewhere.
Yeah. And that's interesting too. Like I didn't realize how many different, depending on what the ecosystem is that you have to deal with and how you might manage that. And it actually has so many different effects. And even when you were saying how sometimes the fire will still cause damage, like even though a lot of Australian landscapes rely on fire or smoke to germinate seeds, there's still so much damage it could do regardless. Like, it's not totally indestructible.
No, definitely not. And even just the frequency of burning. So, certainly there's, part of the community that would like to see areas burned every year. But if that was done, like we'd be reducing the seed bank, and we'd be damaging those species that are more fire sensitive. And so, just sort of looking at the kind of optimal frequencies of fire to maintain, the kind of species diversity in those areas is also another thing. And sort of that's done so you're using high quality vegetation mapping to sort of guide those activities as well.
Yeah, there's actually so much technical knowledge that goes into it. Like it's not as simple as just going out and doing a burn to try and reduce fire loads for next time.
That's right. I mean, like if you had a single goal, then you'd be kind of thinking that way. But if you're trying to manage the Australian bush to keep it healthy as well, and all the animals and ecosystem services that it provides, then you've got to sort of look at it more holistically.
Yeah, so there's some really interesting lessons that you can learn from the natural landscapes that you're working in. Are there any other lessons that you've learned?
I don't know. It's a good question. I think like one of the really important parts when you're working out in a landscape with fire is to really be observant. And so, some of our training is about standing back and maintaining your awareness of your surroundings, so situational awareness, and that really sort of looking at the weather, looking at the fire activity. And so, um, I work on a computer most days, and it's really focused down and really task focused. But just that training to stand back and observe, more broadly, is a really useful skill, and I'm glad I've learned it.
Yeah, definitely. And then how does this volunteer role shape your perspective on, the connectedness between people and the environment and firefighting and how that all links in?
It's interesting. Like obviously, doing my day job is with water science, but I studied environmental science, and when I started my RFS journey, and was starting my training, a friend said to me, "You will never look at the Australian bush again the same way." And it is true. I am much more aware now. Driving around, I think, I wouldn't live there, or that house, is indefensible, and so I think it's made me very aware that we live in a bushfire-prone country, and so it's not if, but when. Particularly if you're out and you have these bush blocks or something, it's when. When will it come, and when will the next fire be? And so it's about being prepared, and if you're prepared and you know what to do, then you come through that much better. And so there are so many ways that you can prepare your property. And it's like my family up in Brisbane, less of a bushfire risk, but they certainly every so often, have storms and tornadoes and flooding. And I'm the person there nagging them, telling them to get their go bag ready and have everything ready. So it just, I guess it makes you aware that in Australia we're living, in a bush that does have extremes. and with climate change, those extremes are becoming more frequent and more intense, and we kind of get these cascading natural disasters where we have droughts, intense droughts followed by intense bushfires followed by intense flooding, and so that's although we haven't seen that kind of summer that we saw in 2019 the same way. This summer has already turned out, we've seen areas dealing with fire and then immediately after dealing with intense rainfall and flooding. And so I think it has just made me very aware, that we really do live in a landscape and we think we've kind of been able to buffer ourselves from that. And in an ordinary day, that's the case, but we still have these disasters coming through, and they're frequent enough that we need to deal with them as though it's a natural part of our life, because it is. And so we need to have our bushfire plans. We need to have our go bags. We need to have the plan for the family to evacuate it. How and where and how are we going to keep up to date with information. And so it's just made me very aware of that our ordinary day-to-day life can be disrupted very regularly by the natural system throwing disasters at us.
Yeah, it's crazy how much they do that, how much people can get affected by different natural disasters. I mean, we see them on the news quite often. It's a lot.
It is, and extreme events. You like that, the nature of they're extreme events, and so there's only so much that kind of human systems, our infrastructure systems that can actually, we can't build to avoid all of these extreme events. Like, they're extreme for a reason, and none of us could afford what it would take to build our infrastructure and all of our systems to withstand that. And so the disruptions to these systems are the norm. So it's definitely being prepared for that.
Yeah, it's almost hard to believe all the just all those things that happen.
When I'm talking to community members, and we're like, do you have a bushfire plan? And sometimes the answer is, well, I hope it doesn't happen to me. And I just think, hope is not a plan. Yeah. And it's when it's before the disaster strikes that you get ready, and then that limits the impact that it has on you, and it doesn't remove it, but it means that you and your family can get through it easier. So yeah, regret lasts for a long time, and longer than it would take to prepare the property, as per the advice. And it's all there. You can kind of Google the RFS website, and they've got lots of really useful advice on how to prepare your properties, the plans for your animals and things. And it's seeing people's regret when it's gone wrong for them that is much harder to deal with.
Yeah, so I suppose that would probably be a message that you wish more people understood about fires or our natural environments that you've learned through your volunteering, is just the art of doing that, getting prepared.
Yep, getting prepared, yep.
How do people go about getting prepared? You said they go onto the RFS website and it's all there, and that's where they look it up.
Yes, yep, very easy. And so you can see there, live bushfire ready, and you can how to prepare my property, and it's really easy. There's just a range of jobs, some good pictures, and you can kind of it also talks you through bushfire planning, and so there's some activities with some questions to prompt you to think about your situation and the best choices for you. And so it really is tailored advice. It doesn't take too long, and it kind of can give you a list of jobs that varying lengths of time, and things that, unless we've been in those situations, things we might not have thought about. So just making sure that you've got your important documents, your medication, or you think about your pets when you think about leaving early. So it's just, and then even how to prepare your house. There's so many things that if we did, would make a property more defensible. And so, some of them are larger, like making sure that there's clear ground around the house, but some of them are smaller, like thinking about, putting damp towels under the door, to stop drafts under doors and making sure windows are closed and things like that. So, um, you know, the preparation that you do well before a fire comes versus, what you're doing in the lead up to a fire coming, how to make the decision whether to stay or go. What are the things that you need to think about to do that? So all of that is on the website, and you can just sort of take the time to work through it. Yeah, strongly recommend it because it's these are the questions by people who have gone through it. And if you haven't, then sometimes we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah, definitely. And this is still applicable to people in suburban areas, not necessarily people who are on acreage or out of town.
Well, I mean, we've seen examples in Canberra or on the Central Coast where, quite suburban areas have been impacted by a fire. And so, yes, like the answer is yes. You might have different circumstances to, if you lived on a 5 acre block and you don't have reticulated water versus if you kind of live in more in suburbia. But you still need to know what to do to protect your families. And so, in Armidale, we've had a few storms and people would never have, thought that kind of damage would happen. So we can't always foresee, what the disaster might be. But certainly, taking the time before to have, our systems in place means that we have an easier ride through the disaster.
Yeah. So what are some basic things that you think people can do to help prevent fires, especially bushfires?
So follow the advice. If there's, in terms of, if it's certainly around in the New England, you can get a permit and you can do hazard reduction yourself on your property. So follow the guidelines when you do that. Make sure that you notify it, and you're following the guidelines in terms of when it's safe to light up. If you're working with power tools and it's dry, have that water sprayer or a hose nearby, so that if a spark does ignite a small fire, then you can, the sooner you can knock it down and tackle it at the smaller stage, the better it is. And then, in terms of preventing a bushfire, like a lot of them start from lightning strikes, and so we can't prevent that. What it really is about for most of us is making the house safe, making the surrounds safe. And so, it's things like clearing vegetative matter away from the house. So you don't want to have bush all the way up to the house. You kind of need a little bit of a break zone there. And then thinking about, keeping your gutters clean. If you have a wood pile on your veranda, then obviously that's fuel right up close to your house. So just keeping it kind of clean around the house, and then removing leaf litter. So raking the yard, raking the sticks away, and kind of just thinking about where your fires are mostly going to come from. What's your exit plan? Like, is there more than one exit that you have? And if not, then you need to look at leaving early.
Yeah, definitely. And then, do you have any advice on the flip side, how people listening could in turn then support our rural firefighters?
Well, we are in desperate need of volunteers in many brigade areas. So for many of our brigades, like general Australia, the population's getting older, and so particularly sort of younger members, and we know with the cost of living crisis, it's hard for people to give time to volunteering, particularly if they're maintaining family and work. And so just realizing, you don't have to be an active firefighter. So there's a lot of roles in the RFS that we really need people to do, and they don't involve actually going out and being an active firefighter. And so there's, people might want to volunteer, but they think I don't really want to, fight fire. And that's fine. There are a lot of other roles, radio operators, people with logistics or catering. And so lots of roles, and look into that if you're interested. You can actually volunteer, or there are also other agencies that support the RFS. So, if you think you can't give that much time, more and more emergency service agencies are learning how to work with people who want to spontaneously volunteer for a specific emergency, but not necessarily, maintain involvement after that. And so I guess it's just putting up your hand and following, looking to see, the organisations that are around and then following guidelines. But obviously the best for us is people volunteer.
Right. So if people did want to volunteer, how does someone go and how do they sign up and join RFS, or what they need to know?
It's very easy. Again, Google will get you there. So if you type join RFS volunteer, then it takes you to a website. You will need some ID to get in, but you can kind of do your application through there. It'll tell you what's your nearest brigade, and the brigade will be in touch. So it's very easy to do it. You don't even have to leave your house. You can just kind of volunteer that way. And then obviously as a volunteer organisation, everyone has different circumstances. They can give different amounts of time. We obviously, we train people. So when you first join up, there's some training to do, and that's mandatory because we need people to be safe if they're sort of working in an emergency fire environment. But then it depends on people's circumstances, how active they want to be involved in that.
Yeah, definitely. And then there was a question I wanted to ask too before we finish. How has your relationship with nature evolved through your volunteer work? And if so, how?
I think so. So it has, and again, it goes back to seeing the landscape. Sort of, I guess my perception's changed now. I do. When I look at the bush, I do kind of think fuel loads and with the firefighting hat on, and what it would be like if a fire came through. And so you're looking at the kind of amount of fuel loads and the structure. Is it just a grasslands or grasslands with trees, or is there a shrub layer that connects it all up? Because that kind of obviously means that the different fuel compartments are all connected, and you might have sort of a more intense fire. So it definitely, it's hard to get away from that. And I don't know if I ever will go back to, just, looking at the bush thinking, isn't that lovely?
Yeah, it's like you're looking at it through firefighter goggles. It's fun.
Yeah, absolutely. But then also, I mean, that's I wouldn't say if it's a downside, but it's certainly the journey I've been on. But it does make you very, very aware. So as you go out and you're seeing fire in the landscape, and it does sort of tie you back into the seasons and make you a lot more, or me, a lot more observant of, I guess soil moisture is the big driver, and the atmosphere and weather, and so I am a weather junkie. I do have 3 weather apps on my phone, and I do look at weather a lot, and so I think it just, you just realize that it's that the seasons and the weather drive fire in that landscape, as well as fuel loads. They're the 2 big drivers, and so you become very sensitive to those 2 things, and you watch for it.
Yeah, no, that's pretty understandable. Oh, well, I think that pretty well brings us to the end of our conversation on firefighting. I think we've probably covered everything, unless there's anything else you thought could be valuable from your time volunteering with the RFS.
I don't know. Anyway.
Well, we'll end with the actionable step that I always like to leave at the end of each episode. Yeah. And what do you have an actionable step that sort of relates to this topic you'd like to share that anybody can do?
Yes. Make a fire plan. Find out what it's involved, go and have a look at the website, and actually start the fire plan, as opposed to planning to make a plan, which is not a plan.
Yes, and that's a good one, because another good example is, we had the LA fires last year, and that's right there in the city, and it was a crazy fire. So yeah, nowhere is definitely fire free, isn't it?
No.
No. Oh, well. Thank you so much for that, Sarah. Thank you for coming on and talking to us about your time with the RFS.
Thank you very much for having me, Jess.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Nature's Nexus podcast. I hope you enjoyed it and found some value in what was shared today. I look forward to presenting more knowledge and sharing ways we can connect to nature in future episodes, and hope you tune in with me to listen, learn, and act. Thank you, and until next time.